Hi, I'm Jake from Jake's Bikes in Bristol, and I'm going to show you the easy way to deal with a flat tyre. All we need is 2 tyre levers, a spare inner tube and a pump. So first of all, I'll take off the valve cap and let the rest of the air out. Before I put the tyre levers on, it's a good idea just to push around the rim so that the tyre comes off, because if it's been on there for a while sometimes they stick, and it also gets a bit of slack, so that I've got a little bit more room to get the first tyre lever in. I'm just popping it over the edge of the rim and under the bead of the tyre, taking care not to pinch the inner tube at the same time, and then I can just hook that first bit of the tyre bead out and over the rim. Then I'll hold that there, or I could hook it onto a spoke here if that was easier, and get my second tyre lever in only an inch or two further on. If I went too far, I'd have a gap of tyre in the middle that hadn't come off, so I'm just going to do it gradually, move along a couple of inches, do the next bit, move along another couple of inches, do the next bit, and I can keep doing that with the tyre lever until it's slack enough to get my finger underneath, and then it should be slack enough that it will just come off with my finger or thumb without having to use the tyre levers anymore. And the nice thing about that is that I don't need to run the tyre levers around the edge. If I did that with a metal tyre lever, it might damage the rim or the inner tube. Then the next thing is to remove the inner tube from the wheel and out from underneath the tyre. Doing this last bit is quite important to do carefully, because the valve where it meets the inner tube is the most fragile bit of the whole inner tube. So I'll remove the valve nut and then just lift the tyre away so that I can pull the inner tube out cleanly from above without bending the valve. So now that I've got the old inner tube out of the way, the next thing is to carefully check the tyre to try and find out what caused the puncture. So starting at the valve hole so that I know where I am once I've been all the way around, I'll just put my fingers up and spread them out so that I'm pulling the whole tyre outwards. And you can normally leave the tyre on the rim. There's no need to take it off entirely. You can do this with the wheel still in place. And at the same time as feeling the inside of the tyre with my fingers as I go round, I'm going to just inspect the top of the tyre here visually and just see if I can see the head of a nail or a little piece of glass. And I'll know that I've got back to the beginning again once I'm round at the valve hole. Here we are. And I've actually not found anything, and I can't see any cuts or damage to the tyre, so I'll assume that it was just a little piece of glass that went in and came out again, but was just enough to make a little hole in the inner tube. The other thing that I should check while we're here is that the rim tape is intact. This red tape here is to prevent the spokes from pushing through and damaging the fairly soft inner tube. So the next thing is to take the new inner tube out of the packet, inflate it just a little bit. On this type of valve, if it's the thin valve with the little screw on the top, you need to undo the screw until it stops, and then just give it a push just to make sure that it's free to move. And then at this stage I'm just going to pump the tube a little bit so that it holds its own shape. The only reason for that is to allow me to poke it into the tyre more easily. So I'm just going to hold the tyre out of the way to one side, and that allows me to put the valve in completely straight and square. I'll then carefully lift the tyre over it without bending the tube to one side, and that way I know the valve is safe. The rest of the tube, poke that in all the way around so that it's sitting down inside the tyre. Then again, starting round at the valve hole, I'm going to push the tyre bead under the rim and in like that so that it's seated, and then I can just work my way round the rim doing the same thing and making sure that I don't catch the inner tube at the same time. And I'll work round and away from the valve as I go round, pushing the tyre bead in under the rim. Now when I get so that I've got most of the tyre onto the rim, at the top here it tends to end up looking very tight. The temptation at this point would be to use a tyre lever and try and hook it on, but that's almost certainly going to pinch the inner tube and cause another puncture before we've even fitted the tube. The secret at this point is not to try and force it on. What we want to do is push the tyre, starting at the opposite side, right down at the valve, inwards and upwards, inwards and upwards, in like that, and then up, inwards and upwards, all the way around. I just end up with a little bit more slack up at this top end here. And then I can do the same thing on this side, inwards and upwards, inwards and upwards, all the way around, and I get this little bit more slack. And if necessary, you can repeat it several times, pushing it in all the way around and moving the slack up, and then, as if by magic, pop. So that's the easy way to fit a new inner tube or a new tyre without having to use tyre levers and without running the risk of damaging the inner tube or the tyre. And it's worth just pushing the valve up inside and just making sure that the tyre is sat down into the rim and that the inner tube isn't being pinched inside by the tyre. And then I can put the nut all the way on, and then I can just connect the pump and pump it up. You want them to be pretty firm. If you've got a gauge on your pump, it will say on the side of the tyre what pressure it should be at on the gauge. And then I'll just give it a spin and make sure that the tyre is seated, just checking that it's not bulging inwards or outwards. And that's it, job done.